Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Nice to see all of you. I'm Barry Edelstein, Erna Fincy Viterbi, Artistic Director of the Old Globe, and I'm really thrilled to welcome you to In Conversation. We're happy to be back. Did one of these virtually during the pandemic, but it's incredibly exciting to be back in person with all of you for this series. The Globe believes that theater matters, and our commitment is to make it matter to more people. We do that in a lot of ways. We put on 15 shows a year here in Balboa Park. We do deep work in the community all around San Diego County, doing participatory theater making activities with refugee populations and homeless populations and incarcerated populations and senior populations and all sorts of folks around San Diego who don't enjoy regular access to the theater. We have a training program where we develop the future generation of American actors. And the other way that we make theater matter is by sharing our work process with you, our audience, and our supporters. And that's why we do this program that we call In Conversation, which when we have a luminary passing through San Diego making work, I have the incredible privilege of sitting down and asking that person to talk about their work and their life. And we have somebody very special with us tonight. Before I introduce him, I want to thank Pam and Hal Fusen, who have underwritten this series, and we thank you very much. Stalwart supporters of the Old Globe and of the arts in San Diego. Pam and Hal, thank you for your generosity. And so now I want to introduce our special guest. Wayne Cilento is here, directing Bob Fosse Dancin. Wayne is one of the most prolific and honored choreographers at work today. He won the Tony Award for his work on The Who's Tommy at a theater just to our north. Nominated for his choreography for a little musical you may have heard of called Wicked, another show called Baby, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, Dream, and Sweet Charity. In his life as an actor and dancer before becoming a choreographer, he was nominated as Best Featured Actor in a Musical for the original production of Dancin. And if all that doesn't earn him legendary status, there's this. He inspired and originated the role of Mike in one of the greatest and most important musicals of all time, A Chorus Line. He's just a giant, a wonderful man, and a wonderful artist as you're about to see. Please welcome Wayne Cilento.
Thank you.
Have a seat. Well, Wayne, thank you for being with us. It's super nice to have you here. How you doing? How you holding up?
I'm good. It's all good. I'm excited for everyone to see this.
We are loving every minute of it. Audiences are overjoyed with the show, and everybody at the Globe has had a great time putting it together. You know, Wayne, back in 2019, we were doing a production here called Almost Famous, and your agent, Susan Weaving, who's here in the house somewhere, came out to San Diego to see it. And she said, Barry, I want to talk to you about a project. So October of 2019, and she sat me down on one of the tables on our plaza, and she said, Wayne Cilento wants to revive Dancin. And I said, wow, you know, that's a sort of amazing idea. At that time, the Fosse Verdon
legacy.
The mini series, the FX series was on. Fosse was in the air, and I knew you, and I knew the show, and we'll talk about why later. And I just thought, wow, that sounds an amazing idea. And here we are. 2.5 years and one global pandemic later, and the show is finally opening. And you know, before I say anything else and ask you anything else, I do have to tell you this. There were moments during that pandemic when the Globe was shut down, when we furloughed 70% of our staff, when times Balboa Park was empty, a ghost town, where I really wondered whether the Globe would ever be able to produce at this level again, where the future of the institution truly, genuinely was in doubt. And when I sat there, and I last saw the show 2 nights ago, and I sat in that house, this giant, glorious production, so beautiful, so full of talent, I just had this huge emotional wave of feeling relief and release that we got here.
Yeah.
So before I ask you anything about anything, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're at the end of previews. The show opens tomorrow night. You have one more afternoon of rehearsal.
Right.
How you feeling? How's it going?
I feel good. I can't believe it. I mean, it's been so interesting being here. It's like heaven, and you're building and rehearsing a big Broadway show, and it's always stressful. But we've had a relationship for 4 years on the phone before I even met you, and before any producers came around and whatever, Barry and I were talking, and I remember that conversation really well. And from then on, I felt like he was my friend and a supporter, so it makes it easier to do what we do. And you're right, the pandemic happened, and then Joey Parnes got involved, and we kept on talking through the pandemic and making schedules, and we said, okay, February, we're going to go into a workshop, or we're going to go into reconstruction, then we're going to go into a workshop, and then we're going to go into rehearsal, and then we're going to go to the Globe. It was like, what? This is so surreal. I mean, are we really going to do any of this? And it happened. It really happened. And it's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I want to talk about all the levels on which it's amazing. But I do want to, let's start by talking about Bob Fosse, who, you were in the original production of Dancin. You had a personal relationship with him, a professional relationship with him. We all have an idea about Fosse. I presume it comes from some experience we've had, Broadway, Chicago, a production that's still running. We've seen Sweet Charity, the movie. Maybe we saw All That Jazz. He's a figure who we have, even those of us with if you have only a fleeting relationship with Broadway, you kind of know who he is. Yeah. Can you just sort of tell us what's important about him? Like what was his contribution that makes him endure this many years, decades after his passing, decades after the great works that he made in the 60s and 70s?
Yeah. He's an interesting dilemma of who he was, and I think that's what inspired me for this reconceived production of Dancin, because going back, I realized and I researched the fact that he was a dancer. He danced, and so all of the iconic images that you have in your head about what he was and what he did is only a small portion of the man. And very charismatic, very quiet, very dedicated, and a very tortured man also. And like all of us creative people, it's never enough. Me as a choreographer, it's like, that was great, but I could have done better. I should fix that. I should do that. And he was same thing. So he always questioned his talent, but he always lived on the edge, and he always made it a point to be above the curve, above the curve and beyond the curve, to kind of keep pushing buttons and being really creative. The unfortunate part of it, and fortunate part of it, is what he seems to be in the image of a lot of people in America is what Ann Reinking has done to his choreography in Chicago. Now, Chicago has been on Broadway for like 20-something years, and her credit was in the style of Bob Fosse. Okay, so Bob Fosse is Bob Fosse. He teaches the choreography, has many interesting characteristics that make his choreography unique. And this is going to sound strange, but he was balding, and he wore a hat, and he always kept his head down. That's one characteristic. He's turned in as a dancer instead of turned out as a ballet dancer. So a lot of the stuff he did was kind of like turned in. He kept his elbows in a lot because he stylistically did stuff like that. And so just because of him as a man, it became part of his style as a choreographer. And so when you look at the older Bob Fosse, that kind of fell into a place for him, and he became a choreographer that was noted for a specific style of choreography, and that's hands, fingers, you know, shoulders, and even in his movies, he would edit choreography or dance sections, and you would see different parts of bodies moving, and he did really well as a director of a film. So Anne Reinking was doing Chicago there's a thing called the Encore series on Broadway, and they do it at Lincoln City Center, and it's just like a very short, brief moment of time, and people put up shows, and Annie happened to be putting up Chicago at the Encore series, and it was a very reduced stylistic thing, like a stage this big with nothing moving, with a band on stage. And what they did was they picked up the show exactly the way it was, and they placed it on Broadway. That show has been running for 20 years.
25, I think.
25 years.
Yeah.
And what they did was they did everyone in black lingerie, black bras, black underwear, black stockings, with the derby and the whole stylistic thing about it. And so that became Bob Fosse, right? Not really. That's a part of Bob Fosse. So when we talked about doing a revival of Dancin, you know, Dancin is so interesting. It was like 43, 45, something.
78.
78.
So 46, is that right?
46 years ago.
Yeah.
He did a piece, and he created a piece. Do you want to talk about that now?
We'll get there later. Let me
Okay,
talk more about Fosse before we get there. But so there's that piece that we think of him, that Chicago has just imprinted that one piece of Fosse.
That's right.
What else, you know, in my, you know, and my knowledge of dance pales in comparison to yours, but what the things we do know about him is that the dancing is extremely muscular and athletic. It's visceral. We know that he demanded a kind of emotional commitment from dancers,
right,
different from what was going on in a Broadway chorus at the time.
Absolutely.
We know that he demanded individuality from his dancers, right? Broadway choruses at the time, everybody was the same.
Right.
Fosse was interested in the distinct individual personality,
right,
of the dancer, right? You get a guy like you different from a guy like this, and a woman who's tall and thin, and a woman who's not, right?
Absolutely.
And the other thing is that the work is sexy. The work is, right, extremely sexy. And, right, his background was in burlesque, right? And he grew up around strippers. There's all that, right?
Yes.
There are all these stories about his early life,
right,
having these intense sexual experiences as a child, pretty much.
He was a child.
He was a child, backstage in the burlesque routine, right?
Right.
So his legacy to dance is that kind of highly fiery, highly intense style that Broadway hadn't seen before. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. He was influenced by black dancers. He loved the Black Hoofers, the Nicholas Brothers, and he loved the rhythm. He syncopates movement. When he tap dances or choreographs tap dancing, it's very much a black style. It's not like 42nd Street. And you're absolutely right. He grew up as a young teenager, and he experienced a lot of things. And he hung out in a burlesque club, and I'm sure had many women, and probably taught him the ropes. And he was that kind of a man who was out on the edge. And I think a lot of that influenced him as a creative being. So it is sexy. It's sexy. There's always an internal thing going on in your head. You can do his choreography, but if you don't have something happening in your head and what you're portraying, it doesn't take on a shape and a form. And you can do steps, but then it's just steps. But if you get in the depth of it, then it becomes really interesting. And that's kind of like what I picked up.
Right. So I passed through the theater the other day while the dancers were warming up, and I saw Tony DeLilio, warming up. I just had a conversation with him, and he said, "God, I'm so tired." And well, I'm not surprised. You know, we were in previews, and you were. I said, well, why? He said, well, when you dance in a dance concert situation, there's an emotional component to it, but it's just not the same as doing this choreography.
Right.
That there's an acting demand that the choreography places that he said makes him feel far more exhausted than he would if he were doing exactly the same physical movements the same number of times.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, it's kind of
I think when you're focused and you're concentrated in doing or portraying something in a particular situation, and you do that piece of choreography, it takes on a whole nother shape if you're doing it right. Or it could just be a bunch of steps thrown in the situation. But if you're really into it, it makes a big difference, and it's exhausting.
Yeah, and he demanded that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the innovations, right?
Well,
one of his.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's kind of it.
Yeah.
He also kind of reinvented the way that dance was filmed, right? And we watch any music video that we watch, and most of us consume dance electronically. We watch it on TV, we watch it on a video. He completely revolutionized the way that a camera catches dance.
Right.
So any music video we watch today in 2022, direct line to Fosse and the way he shot dance.
Exactly.
Right? What was that? Can you describe it?
He was just really good with angles, and not so much like large pieces of choreography. It would be one particular angle, like around eight counts of a movement, and he would just film that. And then he would dissect it and just go from different parts of bodies, like do a high angle, do a low angle, do a side angle, shoot just this part of your body. I'm sorry. And then he would go in and he would edit it. And like if you saw the movie of Sweet Charity, it was so edited that you really don't get a full shape of what the number is, like from point A to point B when you see it on a Broadway show. You have to start in the beginning, go to the middle, go to the end. You know, it's climax, so there's a through line. But in a film, you have the option of doing small sections of choreography and then edit them together and make it one whole. That was a hard part for me because we reconstructed all of his choreography to get to pieces of choreography for the show. And we talk about that later, but you know, we had to dissect it and go, okay, well, that's 4 counts. Where the hell did that go? Where's the other 4 counts to make the 8? You know, that kind of stuff. Piecing it together was very interesting and very difficult.
Working backwards from filmed sequences.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, amazing.
Going, like if you watch Chicago or Sweet Charity and we reconstructed stuff like that, then we reconstructed the movie because it's not on the stage and there's not no notation of it. So we would take that and we would formalize it into a combination and then teach it to the dancers.
That's amazing. So you knew him. I mean, he directed you, he choreographed you. Was he a mentor? Did he become a personal friend of yours?
He wasn't a personal friend, but he, for some reason, he not clung on to me, but he took me under his wing and gave me incredible opportunities.
Well, part of it was, you know, and I want to talk more about your dance career a little bit later, but you know, you were a huge star when you know, then, right? You were like, you were more than a star. You were kind of what in sports would be called a phenom. You know, you were like the guy who leapt super high and did backflips and right.
No backflips. So maybe I jumped high at one point. But
but
no
right. I mean, you were. I think it's important to understand about you. You were a very special thing at that time as a dancer, right? Like the once in a generation guy who comes along that everybody goes, oh my God, Wayne, right? So,
well, I have to say, I think I was more of a stylist, if that makes any sense. Someone that I was like broadly trained. I started really late at 18. I went to college at 19 and I decided I wanted to be a dance major, phys ed major. And what I really did was I danced from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. And I studied with every modern dance teacher you could possibly know. So that was the bulk of my training. And then there was a man named Bill Glassman, who is in New York City Ballet. He's the size of I am, and he taught ballet at the school at Brockport University. So I had this small guide to look up to and fly with. And then I used to go into New York and study with a million teachers, jazz and tap and everything else I can do. So I was well-rounded with that. So, and I had a pretty good, strong ballet technique, but I'm not a ballet dancer. And I think I could do some tricks, but I wasn't like a trickster. I mean, these kids today, they jump in the air and do splits and stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I know. So, it's very sad. But,
So
but
Fosse found you.
well,
Fosse-
okay, so I had done like 5 Broadway shows before I got there. So I started off with Seesaw with Michael Bennett. And then I went to a show called Rachel Lily Rosenblum for 2 minutes and it was closed. And then I went and I replaced someone in Irene with Debbie Reynolds. And then I did all the workshops for Chorus Line. And then I did a Chorus Line. And in the middle of that, I auditioned for Chicago for Bob, and I didn't get it. So I said, I'll stay in Chorus Line. So I stayed in Chorus Line, and I stayed in Chorus Line for a year and a half. I had a little nervous breakdown, and I quit. And then I went back to the ensemble, and I danced with Liza Minnelli in the act. And believe it or not, that's when I got all the reviews. That's when for some reason, I got mentioned everywhere with that. And then with that, well, I guess when I did that, but Graziella Danielle, do you know her?
She was just here. She was
Okay.
just here.
So I used to assist her, and I used to dance for her, but then I started assisting her, and we're very close. And she says to Bob, you need to see this guy, Wayne Cilento. You have to audition him for Dancin. And he said, okay. So I was rehearsing with Liza in one room, and he was in another room doing pre-production for Dancin. And my lunchtime, I ran over to the other room, opened the door, and there's Ann Reinking and Bob Fosse and his drummer, and Gordon Harrell was the piano player. And I danced with Bob and Ann. And they taught me combinations, and I danced with Annie, and Bob stepped out, and then Bob came in, and then Bob danced with me. And so it was like a party. It was like really weird. And then I got at the piano, and I sang a song, and then he raised the key, and then he raised the key again, and he raised the key again. And he says to me, the show is cast. And I went, okay. And he said, and so I really don't know what to do. And he said, but thank you for coming. And I said, it was my honor. Thank you so much. I was flying. I was so happy. Long story short, opening of the act, I'm doing this dance number I'm in the middle of the formation, and I look out in the audience, and there's Bob Fosse staring in my eyes. And I went, oh my God, I'm gonna die right now. So I got through the show, and my wife and I went to opening night party, and I'm, talking to people and stuff, and I run into Bob Fosse, and he says to me, hi. I said, hi. He said, I want you. I said, oh, okay. He said, do you want to do Dancin? I said, yeah. And he said, okay, you're in. I said, I am? I'm in. And I said, but you can't tell Liza because she's going to kill me. We just opened. He said, no, I won't. I'll keep it a secret, but I just want you to know that I want you in the show.
That's amazing.
And that's the beginning.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's a great story,
Yeah.
Wayne. Fantastic story. So, okay, so Fosse had been doing all these book musicals. He'd been choreographing book musicals. He'd been directing.
Right.
And now he decides, I want to do something else, right? And he comes up with this show, Dancin, which doesn't have a book. It's not a story.
Right.
It has narrative sequences in it,
Right.
sequences that tell story. But it's this collection of vignettes and scenes and dance numbers that he's making up in this new form. What was going on with him? Why did he want to move away from the book musical at that point?
I think it was like freedom. I think he just wanted to be set free. I mean, and he wanted to dance to music that he wanted to dance to, and he wanted to do different styles in this piece. It was very colorful, believe it or not. There was no black anywhere, just colorful. We wore very colorful suits. Oh, I lied. There's a black tuxedo that was like our basic costume. And every once in a while we went back, but pretty much everything else was eclectic and just beautiful colors. And So it was a dance format, like a concert format. It was in 3 acts, small acts, and he pretty much did anything he wanted. But the interesting thing about it was, I think he was trying to do a burlesque form, if that makes any sense. So we all introduced, in burlesque, I don't know if you've seen burlesque, they come along with signs, and the girls come out and they do the signs of what the next number is going to be, and then number happens and it begins and it ends. So he was kind of like doing that format. And we would come out, we would introduce a number, the number would happen and it would end. And then another person would come out, introduce another number, it would start and it would end. And in the process of me trying to come up with a new a contemporary take on his show, I said, that's not going to fly. I mean, people don't have the patience to do all of that. And I don't even think it paid off, because I don't even think he knew what they knew, you knew what was going on the stage, that we were actually playing that burlesque thing.
It just was a collection of numbers.
Just a collection of
together.
Numbers, numbers, and with no story, no book, no nothing. It was just vignettes of different numbers, whatever he wanted to do at that time.
So it was a huge hit,
Huge hit.
Ran for 4 years, I think.
Yep.
Something like that. It toured the country, played at the Pantages, I think, for a long chunk of time up in LA.
Yeah, they only had one touring company. One touring company, and I think they tried to go to London, and it was a very short run.
But it went to Japan, right?
Went to Japan.
Mean, there was, so
yeah, but I think all bootlegged.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not officially?
Well, you can ask Joey that, because I don't think they had the rights to the show.
But it was, it was an earlier, progenitor of the big mega hits that we have today, right? 4-year-long run. It was a big deal at the time.
Exactly.
Fosse had pioneered television advertising for Broadway. Right. He made a famous TV commercial for Pippin in a few years earlier than Dancin, which I remember. I was a 7-year-old boy. I write about this in the program for the show. I was a 7-year-old boy in suburban New Jersey, and I remember seeing that Pippin commercial on TV. And why would a 7-year-old boy, even a stage-struck 7-year-old boy, just be stunned by the dance and the movement and
pretty shocking.
Yeah, I guess the sexiness of it didn't hurt, but and then he made this another famous. You should go on YouTube. You see the Dancin commercial, a very famous commercial. You can see Wayne leaping in slow motion in it back in '78, right? And the show really resonated with people. I'm not sure it critically was well received, but it was a big audience success, right? Because thing about Broadway is tourist audience. You don't have to speak English. You don't have to speak at all, right? Just watch dance and enjoy it. It was sexy. It was kind of, vibrant and ran a long time. So then the show ends, and now decades later, you get this idea, revive it. Why hadn't it been revived up till now?
It's a good question, but I know Nicole, his daughter, had the rights to his choreography. And I think she had tried for a while to get a director on board to do Dancin as a revival. And for some reason, it didn't work with Graziella. It didn't work with Annie. At one point, Annie was going to do it. I think they were talking to maybe Sergio for a second, which was very shortly lived. But then this guy, Greg Young, he had the rights for it, and she approved him to have the rights for it. And they had a conversation, and then I got a phone call.
So people had tried. People had tried.
But for some
over
reason,
the years,
I don't know, he could probably tell you.
Yeah.
Bob could tell you. That's our manager. Something happened. It fell apart. The deals fell apart. And she finally approved. I had breakfast with her one morning, and we had bagels and coffee.
Fosse's daughter, right? Fosse's daughter.
Nicole Fosse,
right?
Who was in the Chorus Line movie. She played Christine, and she was in Phantom of the Opera as one of the dancers. I don't know how much more she did, but I mean, if you had a mother, Gwen Verdon, and a father, Bob Fosse, I'd get out of the business really quick. So that's all I got to say. So, So anyway, she approved me.
Right.
And we started talking, and then I started talking to you.
So now you have to figure out how to do it, right?
And then how to do it.
So first of all, there are fewer numbers in this version than there were in 78. Some stuff you cut.
Right.
Why?
So it was 3 shows, 3 acts. So I had to cut some things. Primarily, I cut some of the numbers because politically and controversially, he always had this undertone of sarcasm that he was like reaching out and putting stuff in people's face and seeing what the reaction was. That was his edgy quality, always pushing buttons. And I thought politically, some of the pieces that he did would not fly today because our world is different today. There's a lot of different elements going on with, genders and women's rights and all kinds of stuff that I really didn't want to get into it.
And there's one number. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. There's a choreographer choreographing a ballerina, right?
There's
and
called the ballet bar.
And the whole gig is he's putting her
her.
body in positions that allow him to touch her in sexual ways, right? And that's the gig. And so, like, you can't do that now.
So I said, cut that number. Okay, we're not going to do that number.
Yeah.
And by the way, there was another number called Big City Mime. Mime, M-I-M-E, that's a big issue right now. That we did one night in Boston as a tryout, and it was a man coming into the city and experiencing the city for the first time. So you get into the city and there's hookers and there's pimps and there's panhandlers and there's bums and all kinds of stuff in the city. And then there are bars and there's burlesque clubs and there's S&M clubs and there's, hot houses. And so we did that, but there was no choreography to it. It was just musicalized and there were small little vignettes. Everyone hated it. And so we did it one night and it was cut. So it was cut, but then he put in the ballet bar. So he said, okay, I'll show you. I'll do something even worse. So,
wow. Yeah.
So that was that.
And that's back in, but it's called Big City Mime.
Big City Mime.
Mime.
It's like mime.
Oh, mime? Oh, I thought it was mine with an N.
No,
Okay.
no, Joey's laughing. No, it's mime.
Okay, well, anyway,
Right.
so that's back in.
So I created a ballet, we'll talk about it later,
Right.
of that piece.
So now the next thing you got to figure out is all the music, right? Because the music is, there's a couple of, there's American patriotic music,
Right.
there's classical music,
Right.
there's Broadway music, there's the most famous number in the show is Benny Goodman's Sing,
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 Sing, right.
right? So which is just mind-blowingly brilliant and like, come see that again and again and again. The whole show's great, but that's a stunner. And then there are these 70s songs, right?
Right.
And we've been talking a lot about that, about the
Right.
show's roots in the 70s versus 2022.
Right.
So you had to deal with the music, too.
Right. Well, I mean, first conversation we had, a serious conversation. I don't know if our relationship was going to go where it is right now, which is very respectful and love this man. But he said, Wayne, why crunchy granola? Why don't you just pick any music that you want, something contemporary? And I went, yeah, that's a good idea. And I thought about it. And then he said, and why Here You Come Again? Because that's old and that's Dolly Parton. And it was one of Bob's favorite songs. And I went, yeah, that's a great idea. So I try to get the Dolly Parton thing out. And I try to get a Kelly Clarkson song because she has a song about being a whole lot of woman. So I thought that would be appropriate for the women of today, for the girls to sing. And then I went back to Crunchy Granola and I thought, I don't know about that, because obviously I could pick a piece of contemporary music and insert his choreography and make it work. I mean, I've done that before. Actually did that for the audition. We did all of his choreography, but we did it to a contemporary piece of music. And then I thought to myself, is that a cop-out? It's kind of like not dancing if I don't do Crunchy Granola. It was the opening number. So the only way out for that was to orchestrate it like a rock and roll song. So it's electric guitar, it's loud, it's rock and roll, it's today, and it works.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay.
And it doesn't, the song is a Neil Diamond song.
And it's Neil Diamond, it's not a great song, but yet it's
No.
okay now. It's really.
And in the Neil Diamond, you know, and I
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago I listened to the Neil Diamond song, and at one point he goes, "Dig,"
Yeah.
and you just think, wow,
That's not it.
1975, a white guy yelling "dig." That can't, no, you don't get more 1975 than that.
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't sound like that anymore.
I
you
mean,
know?
I think there's a 70s vibe that hangs over the show because it was built in that, but I kind of got away with it for some reason because we did new instrumentation and new orchestrations, and we really got it to a contemporary sound. So it feels young and fresh in the music department.
And that's Jim.
And
Jim.
this guy, Jim Abbott, is like a genius. He came in late, and he orchestrated the music, and it's kind of spectacular. And even Joey wants to do an album. That's how good, an album of a dance show.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Yeah. So now, then what you've got to do is reconstruct the choreography. So can you talk about that process? How do you do that?
Yes. So there is a woman called Christina Colby, and she was in the original show with me. And I thought she was a beautiful dancer, and she's very sweet and charming. So I asked her to come in and help reconstruct all the choreography from Dance in the Show. And then my associate and assistant and our assistant choreographer, Lauren, they reconstructed all the other pieces of Bob Fosse's work, and we put that in this ballet called Big City Mime, the one that was cut. So I made my own ballet. So the process was exhausting, and it took a minute. You know, it's doing research and watching film clips and putting pieces together and, you know, notating it and then giving it to the company and teaching the company. And it's a really long, very tedious process.
Meticulous and detailed.
And I have to say, everything in the show is Bob Fosse's choreography. I swore to myself that I wouldn't do one bit of choreography, but I staged it. So, so I manipulated it and changed the configuration of stuff just so it would feel like an environmental piece, but I didn't change his choreography. It's like everything was presentational because it was in a proscenium dance format. So pretty much all of the choreography was set in numbers. So everyone had a number and the people in the middle of the number, and everyone did the combination facing front. So what I did, very simple, I just faced two people together, and they did the same combination, and it looked like they were dancing with each other. And it was in opposition. So it's same choreography, but just a different configuration.
Now, the reconstruction process, however, could get very technical. You know, your head has to be this angle, and your finger has to go there. You didn't do that, right? You've given the dancers some license here. Can you talk about that?
Because I feel like when he did the choreography on the original company, he never got into that. It wasn't all about that and what people think it is, you know, being like a carbon copy, being a robot, being very specific, don't breathe, look over there, don't move, do this, don't do that. You know, it wasn't that. And so I felt I needed to teach the choreography and let them interpret it. And if things came up, I would clarify it, but I wouldn't drill them on it. And I feel like we bred life into his work again. I feel like it's at the level that it was when we first did it, as opposed to being so clean and cleanly with it that it loses its life. Mm-hmm. And I feel strongly about it. It's a really hard position for me to take because things are going to get overboard. People are going to insert themselves a little bit too far in his work, and it's going to shift his style. And the most important thing is the style. So
now you got to find dancers, right? So one of the things you've done is you've changed a lot of gender around in the way that you've cast it, right? So we have duets that were danced by a man and a woman in '78 that are danced by two men here or two women here. Famously, Anne Ryan King's big solo in the middle of Sing, Sing, Sing is danced by a man here, or I guess a non-binary, I'm not exactly sure how Colton identifies, but not a woman, right?
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, about how you cast the show and where you found the dancers.
Well, we did auditions for over a month. We saw like around 700 people, and I was looking for all different ethnic qualities to incorporate the world that we're in right now. And same thing with gender, just didn't matter. You know, whoever was really good, take it, and we put them in places that we feel like would enhance the situation that we're in, and you know, accept all of that. And it's kind of really invigorating to see the freedom of just casting really amazing people in roles that they would never have in the past.
There are a wide range of ages. That's what's one interesting thing about it. I mean, there's some very young dancers, but there are also some real seasoned veterans in there.
Well, because what I've done is we kind of strung a book together in a strange sort of a way. There's a section called the percussion section, and like I said about the introduction, each person would come out and introduce the particular, there's 4 sections, the particular section they would do. And they did it 4 times. So I said, you know what, let's write a monologue for one person. And that person will come out and she will introduce all of the sections in one monologue. And then I strung all of the percussion sections together. So it's seamless. It just moves like a movie and just kind of blends from one thing to another. To take it on to more of a contemporary style.
And you brought a writer in to...
And I brought in Kirsten Childs, who was in the show, not with me, but after I left, she came into the show, and she danced for Bob, and she did Chicago with Bob. She did a couple of shows with Bob, so she really has an affection for him like I do. And I said, listen, I'm going to do this.
And then became a playwright, right? She became a playwright.
And now she's a playwright. She teaches at NYU, and she's amazing. She's really a talented woman. And I said, would you help me structure a book for the show? And she said, yes, of course. She's very respectful to Bob. We did monologues or introductions that he did. We kept it intact, but we added elements to it just to feel like we were moving in our time, to explain what was going on. And it worked out really well.
Yeah.
Really well.
Let's talk a little bit, we were talking about this earlier today, about the difference between a dancer in 1978 and a dancer in 2022. I'm curious to know what today's dancer reveals in 45-year-old choreography that we wouldn't have seen 45 years ago.
Right.
What happens?
I think their energy happens. Whoever they are, the being that they are as dancers, come into a situation where they're learning a style, and they do the style, but they got this different energy and a different way of thinking about how you approach choreography, as opposed to how I trained, how they trained. They do hip hop, they do athletics, they do whatever they do, street dancing, and they bring that energy into it. So it takes on a different shape in itself, just the people that we picked. And I really feel like casting is key. You know, if you pick the right people to do the work, that takes on the shape of the show. And if they're the wrong person, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and the choreography feels very fresh. It feels very contemporary. It doesn't feel like it's a reconstruction of something old.
Absolutely.
Also, they are, it seems to me, you know, I imagine the life of a Broadway dancer in 1978 involved some slightly different post-show behavior than maybe we would expect now. Right? I mean, everybody's got an Instagram account, and you check out their Instagram account, and it's like, look at my kale smoothie, you know? And look, it's 7:30 in the morning, and I'm at the gym. And I mean, there's a sense of like clean living. That I just don't know was part of the culture of Broadway in the time of Fosse. Is that fair?
That's totally fair.
Yeah.
That's totally fair. I don't even want to talk about the drugs that were going on in the theater. I had babies. I couldn't deal with drugs. I just had to get home. But yeah, it was bad. I don't even know if it affected them because they were so stoned. Even if they hurt themselves, they wouldn't know.
Wow.
But this generation, you know.
That's
And I feel like
wild.
they're really disciplined, very dedicated to the craft. These young kids, their bodies, they take care of their body. They have to be really disciplined, and it's a hard one. You have to stay in shape, and you have to be really on your game to get through this show, and let alone a week of this show. So
Yeah, the condition that
Yeah.
they're in, the things that they do, they're quite superhuman. And then they sing,
Yeah.
and they act. It's a remarkable thing.
Well, I want to get back to what you said about the older generation with the younger generation, and we kind of like did that on purpose because of what you just said. The older generation had this experience, and they had the savvy to do lines and scenes, and if they were able to sing a song and dance. And then the younger generation, who were very naive, who were ready to kill themselves, would look up to the older generation, and it merged as one big group. It's like the older generation needed to dance like the younger generation, and the younger generation needed to look at the experience and step up to the plate. So for some reason, it really, I didn't intend that to happen, but it kind of happened. I just knew I needed a couple of ringers in there to carry some weight.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. So we're nearing the end of our time, sadly, Wayne. But there's one thing I want to ask you. One of my favorite sequences in the show is there's a tap sequence in the middle of Sing, 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 when two guys come out and do a tap dance. And if I had my life to live over again, I would learn how to tap dance, because I look at those guys and I go, that is my idea of a man. Like a guy who tap dances. The sexiest, most compelling, coolest, right? I don't want to hit a home run in the bottom of the ninth of the World Series.
I could teach you some of that.
I would love to, like that. I want to tap like those guys do. So here's my question to you. You did that tap in the original dance.
Yes, I did.
Is there, when you watch it, do you remember it in your body? Do you have the experience of, I recollect that it's a dream that I'm seeing in front of me?
Well, let's put it this way. Some guy came in, I don't even know who it was, to teach the tap combination. And I don't know why. I kind of blanked it out, but I know it was in there. So as he was teaching it, I kind of like stood in the background, and I kind of like did the steps. And as I was doing it, it amazed me that my body went back into it.
Wow.
And it was interesting, we didn't wear taps. So on their shoes, they have tiny little nail heads all along the side of their shoe, on the toe, and on the back. Because a lot of the stuff is like really small, little vibrating kind of stuff. But it's really tight, so it's all of that stuff. And he didn't want a tap sound. So we did that to the guys. I have to say, watching that number for the first week or so, I cried every time. Every time I watched it, I cried. It blows me away.
Yeah. It is truly one of the most amazing sequences. And the two guys who do it, Manny and Jacob, are so cool, and they're different from each other. They're slightly have a different vibe in their body. But I do wonder whether that experience of having been inside of it, now looking at it from the outside, do you remember? Do you watch a number and go, oh yeah, I was standing stage left and I saw this thing? Is it that present in you?
It's a rough one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember it, and in Big Deal, and I also was one of those guys, and we were trying to reconstruct it, and I'm watching myself on a TV screen, and I'm going, oh yeah, I remember that, and I try to do it, and my body doesn't move, and it's like, oh my God, and I came home, I was like not doing well that day. It was like, oh my God, I'm really old, and I really had a rough time remembering piece by piece. I mean, you're conditioned when you're young. I used to go into a class and they used to teach combinations, and I used to pick them up in 2 seconds. my brain doesn't work like that anymore. So it's rough. I remember it. I can sense it. I see myself doing it, but it's not coming out.
It's wild. It's wild. Last question. Have the company, since they know, first of all, you are the eminent figure in dance that you are, and on Broadway that you are, but they know you were there. They know that you were backstage having conversations with Fosse.
Right.
What's that been like for these young dancers to feel that connection across time to
I don't know
you who are
exactly
there?
what it feels like, but I know that when I get up, and I don't get up much, it's usually when something is going wrong. And I'll get up and I'll take off, okay, I'm going in, take off my shirt. Seriously. And then I would start, and it does come back, because like now I'm at the breaking point, and I know I have to pull it out to show them. And it's something like sing, sing, sing with the angle of the body and the foot, and everyone's like straight up and doing a kick. And I said, no, it doesn't work like that. You have to, he's never straight. He is never straight. There's always something off like this, and you're off and you're kicking, and the thing goes up in the air. So they're going like this. And it's like, okay, that's not it, guys. So I would go in, and then the room would get silent, because they would go, oh God, that's what it is. And so that makes me feel bad, but then I can't walk for 3 days.
Well, Wayne, one of the things, and I hope all of you will see it not once but many times, Bob Fosse is threaded through the show in the person of these dancers, which is one of the things that you've done in your recreation of this. And so we come away with this sense of having been visited momentarily by his genius again. And it's an act of love, it seems to me, as I watch it, that you love this guy and you admired what he gave, and your work here on our stage is to share with the world that love that you feel for this figure and what he meant. And that's so palpable, and it's extraordinary. And so I want to end where I began, with thanking you for bringing this beautiful work here to the Old Globe, to San Diego. It opens tomorrow. Come and see it. Thank you, everybody, very much.
Thank you.